Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Glad you're here. Hey, our new app for your smartphone is available right now. Just search for The First TV in the App Store, and it is yours free. Everything's on demand, and you can watch live as well. It's perfect. It's the best way to watch right there on your phone, The First TV. Read something yesterday that said for masks to work as a whole, right, you need something like 80% of people to be wearing them in a particular area. I guess it's like a similar concept to herd immunity, right? You need about 70, 80% of people to have immunity in order for the herd immunity to work. This is from a Berkeley computer scientist who ran these models on masks or no masks. He said if 80% of a closed population were to don a mask, so like inside a restaurant or a grocery store, then infection rates would statistically drop to 1/12 the number of infections compared to no masks. Okay? So you need like 80% of people need to be wearing a mask in order for it to really have a big effect. So the question is, are 80% of people going to wear a mask? No. Not at all. So I was wondering, I said, well, I wonder how many people are wearing masks these days. Like in California, I live in San Diego. A lot. Whenever I go to the grocery store, there's a lot of people wearing masks. It's mandatory now, in Target and grocery stores. So I see a lot of masks out there, but not everywhere. So here's a poll that was recently asked. It was a very simple question. Do you wear a face mask when you go out? And you pull it up here. You guys can show the map. The states with the most compliant is New Jersey, 56%. And then New York, 53, California, 52. All the yellow tan states are in the 40s and the red states are in the 30s. That's 30% compliance, right? Like most states, 40. Let's say the average is 40% compliant. 40, you need 80. Wearing a mask is like the easiest thing that you could possibly do, and you still only have about a 40% compliance rate. So I was thinking about all the other things that we need a high compliance rate in order to be effective, right? So there's four that I could think of. There's four things that people are talking about that you need 80 or 90% of people to do it, otherwise it's not even worth doing. It's vaccines, tracking, testing, and masks. And I think that's probably the order too. That's probably the order of lowest level compliance to highest level. So lowest compliance is going to be vaccines. We can talk about vaccines all day long, but what percentage, surely, what do you think? I mean, I don't know, I'm making it up, but what percentage of people do you think are really going to take a brand new vaccine? Whether they should or not, what percentage of people do you think will? And I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I'm just 30% of people are going to take it, right? I don't know. Then the tracking apps, what percentage of people do you think are going to download the tracking app? Remember we talked about Singapore, which is a pretty compliant culture, and they had like 40, I think it was 40% of people downloaded the app, and that was it. And you need about 80, 90% of people to download it for it to work. If that was in Singapore, you had 40%, so you're probably going to only have about 30% of people download a tracking app. And then testing, maybe you'll get 40% of people who are willing to really do any testing, but most won't. And then even masks. Masks, you're only getting at best a 56% compliance rate. So honest question, and I don't mean to be a jerk about this, this is just reality. If the main things that you're talking about require, say, 80% compliance, and you're never gonna get anywhere near that, are they even worth talking about? Listen, perfect world? Yeah, perfect world. We need to test and track and wear masks. Everyone do it. Boom, done. Problem solved, right? Great. But it's not going to happen. You have to filter all this through reality. We've said this from the beginning, particularly a message to politicians. You have to filter, politicians, decision makers, you have to filter all of the epidemiological and economic advice that you're getting from scientists and economists and everyone else. You have to then filter it through the lens of human nature. Otherwise, nothing you're doing will work at all. An epidemiologist can say, everyone needs to hang upside down for 12 hours a day and you'll never get the virus. Like, okay, great. But no one's gonna do that. You're not gonna force everyone to do a handstand for 12 hours a day, so give me something else, right? I need another thing that people can do because no one's going to do that, right? You see what I'm saying? If people don't follow the advice, then there's no point to enforce it. Politicians should only implement what is feasible and within the limits of human behavior. We could talk all day about test and track. But if people are going to want to get tested and no one's going to want to get tracked, you got to give me something else. If you propose and implement something that goes beyond our human nature's limits, worse than nothing, you're going to get a lot of pushback. And then you're going to undermine any of the good things that you could still do. I'll give you an example. This is from Dan Crenshaw's Twitter yesterday. Things you can and cannot do. This is from Beach in New Jersey. So oddly, permitted and prohibited. So what's weird is permitted, you can surf, but you're not allowed to swim, but you are allowed to exercise, but not if the exercising is swimming. You can't do that. But you notice the one on the bottom left, you're allowed to fish. No chairs, okay? Don't you go thinking that you can sit down when you're fishing. You want to kill grandma, don't you? You want to fish and sit? What's that about? Can't sit? Why in the world not? Why in the world not? Can you not sit? So here's what's going to happen. Okay, so that's an example of an overreach. You're pushing too far against the limits of human nature. So what's going to happen, I guarantee it, is someone's going to go fishing and they're going to sit in a chair. Some police officer is going to come over and tell the guy to leave. Someone's going to take a picture of it. And then there's going to be a bunch of protest and civil disobedience with a lot of people bringing chairs to the pier to fish. And then there's going to be an even bigger police response, and then an even bigger protest. And then you're going to have what they had in Berlin with 131 people being arrested. It's going to be this whole big thing that was totally unnecessary. We need a massive de-escalation. And it starts with politicians filtering what's the best case scenario advice that we can actually do, right? I want to hear everything you want, epidemiologists. I want to hear everything you think we should do. And I'm going to do the thing that I think people would actually do. Maybe like a half a step further, but that's it. Let me share something new. I saw this yesterday. It's kind of going around. It's called the shopping cart theory. You heard this yet? Shopping cart theory. It says the shopping cart is the ultimate litmus test for whether a person is capable of self-governing. To return the shopping cart is an easy, convenient task, and one which we all recognize as the correct, appropriate thing to do. To return the shopping cart is objectively right. There are no situations other than dire emergencies in which a person is not able to return their cart. Simultaneously, it is not illegal to abandon your shopping cart. Therefore, the shopping cart presents itself as the apex example of whether a person will do what is right without being forced to do it. No one will punish you for not returning the shopping cart. No one will fine you or kill you for not returning the shopping cart. You gain nothing by returning the shopping cart. You must return the shopping cart out of the goodness of your own heart. You must return the shopping cart because it is the right thing to do, because it is correct. And a person who is unable to do this is no better than an animal, an absolute savage, who can only be made to do what is right by threatening them with a law and the force that stands behind it. The shopping cart is what determines whether a person is a good or bad member of society. Now listen, perhaps there's a little bit of extra drama there, all right? But how this relates to COVID, let me give you an example. Tesla. California, the state of California says Tesla can go back to work. But the county that Tesla's located in California says they can't. So Musk says, to heck with you guys, everyone's going back to work. If you want to arrest anyone, arrest me. So now Alameda County is in a bit of a pickle. Same thing with Arkansas. Arkansas, there's a concert going on Friday. It's in a venue with normally, if it's 1,100 people, they're going to cut it down to 229 people. It's on Friday. But in Arkansas, you can't have a concert until Monday. But even then, you can't have any events over 50 people. And this concert is going to have 229 people. So the governor of Arkansas and the county in Arkansas and Alameda County here in California are in a bit of a pickle here. So in Arkansas, if you shut down the concert, you're going to get a lot of ticked off people who are going to protest in response to shutting it down. If you don't shut down the concert, then every other business that can't stay open is going to say, well, heck with this. I'm opening up tomorrow. You didn't shut them down. Why am I have to follow your rules? And I'd argue that the counties put themselves in that position. They put themselves in that position for making that order, which may be the best thing to do epidemiologically, but it's not in line with the limits of human behavior. Because of that, it won't work, and you're going to get pushed back, and then it's going to be this whole thing. So back to the shopping cart. The role of government is to be wise and consider human nature. And there's a role for each individual person as well. Every time I use a shopping cart, I don't know about you, but every time I use a shopping cart, I get back to the car, I empty the groceries, and I never want to return it. Like I always have a strong urge to just leave it anywhere. I never want to. I have to actively overcome the desire inside of me to leave it wherever I am. I have to actively overcome the desire to be selfish and lazy and leave it aside. And I have to purposefully, intentionally do the right thing. But our human nature, it's like that with everything, right? Putting the shopping cart back is a metaphor for things you should do in life that you don't want to do, right? Now, normally, what are the things that make people do the things that they don't want to do? What are the things that make people put the shopping cart back? Well, we need more of those things. We need more of those forces at play. Otherwise, no good things will ever happen. I'm reading this book called Posterity. It's a book of letters written by great Americans to their kids. It's a really good book so far. And I read one yesterday from John Adams. He wrote this to his 23-year-old daughter right when he was taking over the White House. And it was advice to her on how to raise her kids. Here's what he said. He said, give them not only a thirst for knowledge, and also a taste for letters should be cultivated, but also prudence, patience, justice, temperance, resolution, modesty, and self-cultivation should be recommended to them as early as possible. The command of their passions, the restraint of their appetites, reverence for superiors, especially parents, a veneration for religion, morals, and good conduct. And he goes on and on. The point is, these are things that individuals need to do, that we need to do. So we need to do the right thing as individuals, right? We need to have respect, reverence, command of our passions, restraint of our appetites. I just want to leave the shopping cart here. No, put it back. Do the right thing. We each need to individually, always, all of us, do the right thing. And politicians need to know their role too. They need to filter everything through human nature. And if we both do this properly, then we can get through this as best as possible. But if either of them breaks down, then the whole thing's going to crumble. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we're going to talk to Heather McDonald from Manhattan Institute coming up in just a second here. But first, this is an amazing story that I'm so grateful we know now. So you remember the book Lord of the Flies? Think back to 10th grade English class. A group of British schoolboys get stuck. Their plane crashes on a deserted island, and they have to figure it all out for themselves. And obviously, all heck breaks loose. And the kids, they try to kill each other, and they're like chasing after each other, and one of them runs into some British naval officer, and the adults just condescendingly are just shocked at how foolish these children are behaving. Yet, as they lecture these kids in their foolish ways, their own naval warship is in the background. And maybe we adults are just as bad as blah, 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 blah. That's the book. It's written in like 1952 or something like that. Lord of the Flies, that's the literal translation of Beelzebub, who's one of the gods that the Philistines worshipped. They talk about it, God talks about it in 2 Kings. That's Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. Anyway, somewhere along the line, this became one of the most popular and influential books of all time. Now, obviously, it never happened. That story never happened. Well, it didn't happen like that. It didn't happen yet. Again, that book was written in 1952 or 4 or something like that. This is Rutger Bregman, historian. He said, I first read Lord of the Flies as a teenager, and I remember feeling disillusioned afterwards. But not for a second did I doubt Golding's view of human nature, the author. that didn't happen until years later when I began delving into the author's life. I learned what an unhappy individual he had been, an alcoholic, prone to depression, a man who beat his kids. This is a quote from Golding. I've always understood the Nazis because I am of that sort of nature. And it was partly out of that sad self-knowledge, it's his own quote, that he wrote Lord of the Flies. So this historian began to wonder, has anyone ever studied what real children would do if they found themselves alone on a deserted island? So it turns out it did happen. 1966, 6 boys were on a fishing boat on a little island called Tonga near New Zealand. We have a newspaper article from an Australian newspaper. It said, the boys have been rescued by an Australian sea captain after being marooned on the island of Atta for more than a year. So this historian found this article from 1966, and it's like, wait, what? Like, what is this article talking about? And he tried to hunt down the boys. Now he started with, there was only one name in the article, and it was the name of the captain of the Australian boat that found the boys. His name was Peter Warner. So this historian reached out to Peter Warner and said, tell me your story. So long backstory as to why this guy was at sea, but he saw off in the distance a fire on this little tiny island. And he said it was very rare for a fire just to be set spontaneously in the tropics. So he pulled out his binoculars and saw this naked boy, hair down to his shoulders. And said, what is going on? So he came ashore. Said, hey guys, get on the boat and let's go home. He said the boys, once aboard, claimed they were students at a boarding school in Nuku'alofa, the Tongan capital. Sick of school meals, they decided to take a fishing boat out one day, only to get caught in a storm. First of all, how cool is that they're like, this food stinks, and they went fishing for their own. It's pretty awesome. Likely story, Peter thought. Using his two-way radio, he called to Nuku'alofa. He said, I got 6 kids here. The operator said, stand by, came back 20 minutes later. As Peter tells this part of the story, he gets a little misty-eyed. Finally, a very tearful operator came back on the radio and said, you found them. These boys have been given up for dead. Funerals have been held. If it's them, it's a miracle. And it was them. 6 boys. The youngest was 13. The oldest was 16. They went to a Catholic boarding school and were on that island for 15 months. So let me cut to the chase. How did it go? They're on the island for 15 months. How did they survive? This is what the captain wrote in his memoirs. He said, by the time we got there, the boys had set up a small commune with food gardens, hollowed out tree trunks to store rainwater, a gymnasium with weights, a badminton, but I imagine the weights are like a bamboo stick with like coconuts on it, right? A badminton court, chicken pens, and a permanent fire, all from the handiwork, an old knife blade, and much determination. While the boys in Lord of the Flies came to blows over the fire, those in the real-life version tended their flame so it never went out for more than a year. Their fire never went out for 15 months. Amazing. The kids agreed to work in teams of 2, drawing up a strict roster for garden, kitchen, and guard duty. Sometimes they quarreled, but whatever that happened, they solved it by imposing a timeout. Self-imposed timeout, 14, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. Their days began and ended with song and prayer. Kola, one of the boys, fashioned a makeshift guitar from a piece of driftwood, half a coconut shell, and 6 steel wires salvaged from their wrecked boat. An instrument Peter has kept all these years. Amazing. And they played it to lift their spirits, and their spirits needed lifting. All summer long, it hardly rained, driving the boys frantic with thirst. They tried constructing a raft in order to leave the island, but it fell apart in the crashing surf. Think, what's the Tom Hanks movie? Castaway, right? Remember how hard it was for him to get out past the surf. Worst of all, Stephen, one of the boys, slipped one day, fell off a cliff, broke his leg. The other boys picked their way down after him and helped him back up to the top. They set his leg using sticks and leaves. Don't worry, one of them joked. We'll do your work while you lie there like King Tuafuahu Tapuo himself. Is the actual king of the island. They survived initially on fish, coconuts, and birds. They drank the blood as well as eating the meat. Seabird eggs were sucked dry. Later, when they got to the top of the island, they found an ancient volcanic crater where people had lived a century before. There, the boys discovered wild taro, bananas, and chickens, which have been reproducing for the 100 years since the last Tongoans have left. Could you imagine that? I wonder when they finally got to the top, right? So they're sucking back bird blood to live, and they're like, oh, let's go to the top of the mountain. And they get there, and there's chickens and bananas. Like they hit the gold mine. They were rescued 15 months later. They were strong, healthy. The boy's leg healed perfectly. What? So the historian says it's time we tell a different story. The real Lord of the Flies is a story of friendship and loyalty. One that illustrates how much stronger we are if we lean on each other. The real Lord of the Flies that actually happened. Now, yeah. There's a couple differences between the fake Lord of the Flies and the real Lord of the Flies. One would be the number of kids, right? We don't know how many, in the book they didn't say how many kids, but it was a choir, so maybe there's like 20 kids. In real life, there were 6. So maybe 6 kids isn't enough to create factions and different tribal allegiances, maybe. Maybe things would have been different if there were 20 kids who got stuck in real life. The big question mark for me, and we're gonna reach out to this historian because I have a ton of questions for him, but the big one for me is leadership. What did that look like, right? Who emerged as the leader of the 6? And what type of leadership posture did he use for those 15 months? How did he keep leadership, right? I'd imagine he was a servant leader. Never asking anyone to do anything that he wasn't willing to do himself or didn't also do himself. So I imagine that, but I don't know. And I'm also curious what type of boys the other kids were. I was thinking about this yesterday. I'm sure I'm wrong. So help me, I need your help with this. There's millions of books on leadership. Millions of books on leadership. Are there any books on like followship? There's not even a word for it. Like I don't even so, right? Are there any books on how to be a good follower? Or how to take orders well, how to do your job well even when you don't want to, how to do your job without grumbling and complaining, how to look past the flaws of your leader, how to assume the best, how to serve the team. Are there any books on that? Because that doesn't match our American ethos in so many ways. It matches the biblical one. Like Romans 13 is a very, very challenging scripture. So it starts off with there's no authority except that which God has established. That's really tough for a lot of people. Like a lot of Christians like push that one aside. But the scripture ends with give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay them. If revenue, then pay it. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. That's not that we want to hear in our modern, independent, you're not the boss of me, narcissistic era. But if a leader emerged from the 6, of those 6 boys, that's great. But if 6 leaders emerged, not great. All right? If all 6 of those boys were reading up on their leadership books, then that's how you get the chaos and the factions and all that, right? That group needed 5 great followers. Oh, here's a word that every American hates. And this kind of ties into COVID because we said before that the independent can-do spirit of America and then like the I'm not going to listen to you, government. Like that's 99.99% of the time. That's awesome. I'm so on board with the you're not the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do. I'm my own man. Like 99.99% of the time, that's the best. Maybe the 0.01% of the time when it's not the best thing is a pandemic. It's like the one time when it's like, oh, maybe we kind of all got to do the thing that everyone says, right? I mean, it's the one time when we need. But here's the word that no one likes, and you're gonna repel from when I say this word. You're gonna have a repulsive reaction to it. Obedient. Ooh. What do you think of? I think of a dog, right? We want our dogs to be obedient. No one wants to be known as obedient, right? But there's something there, and I don't know, I haven't done a study on this, but there's something there that's really important about how to be a good follower at certain, and then also I'm sure each boy had a moment where they needed to lead, so they needed to be prepared for that too, and I just wonder how that dynamic worked on that island. The boys, again, they went to a Catholic school, so I wonder how much that helped them in leadership roles and in fellowship roles. There's not even a word for that, fellowship. I think my COVID takeaway from this, and then we'll get to our guest. The author, William Golding, about how he was able to change our entire perspective of human nature with this book. Now, I'm in a sticky spot here because I happen to believe the Bible and that human nature is bad. Mark 7 says, from within, out of the heart of man comes evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, wickedness, deceit, envy, slander, pride. Like it just goes on. It talks about the human heart is defiled and deceitful. Genesis says every inclination and thoughts of the heart was only evil continually. So it's every, only, continually. That's our human nature. And I agree perhaps with William Golding on that. But here's the big but. That's in a closed system. That's a system with no external forces at play, whether it be the transforming grace of God internally or external culture. We don't live in a closed system. We live in a system with a lot of forces at play that can change you, whether it's an internal heart change or at least an external behavior change. Human nature is bad. And William Golding in the book Lord of the Flies tried to prove that with this made-up story. Human nature is bad, but what he missed is redemption. And the ability still, in spite of that, to still do good. The book Lord of the Flies didn't do that. The real Lord of the Flies did. And that's our potential today, too, in the midst of this COVID. COVID is bad, and this whole thing is screwed up and messed up, and we all hate all of it. But there's a chance for redemption out of all of it, too, personally and as a country, if we want it. Heather McDonald next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back. I read a article the other day that it's one of those things you read and your brain is just like, wait, none of this makes sense at all. We got to go to the source. We got to go to the author. And of course, it's the great Heather McDonald, fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and her book is called The Diversity Delusion. Miss McDonald, how are you?
Fine, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
No, good to talk to you. So this is an article about the NIH, the CDC, the National Science Foundation, writing or giving special grant privileges to who exactly?
To the alleged victims of American sexism and racism. You get special preferences as a student, a science student, or a researcher if you are female or what is known as an underrepresented minority, which means Blacks and Hispanics. Asians don't count as minorities in STEM or people of color because they are so very successful. A person of color, by definition, is somebody who is not academically competitive.
There were other standards there that I've never heard before too, right? Like foster, if you grew up in foster care and stuff?
Well, that was new to me. This shows that the social justice mission in our nation's science agencies, these are agencies that were founded to support basic biomedical research that are working now on vaccines for the coronavirus and other problems. They were founded with the idea that what matters is merit, your scientific accomplishments, nothing else, not the trivialities and irrelevancies of sex and race. But the social justice mission has expanded even beyond traditional identity politics. So now you get special preferences if you are or were homeless, if you had a mother who was on the WIC program, which is an additional food stamps for single mothers, if you were in foster care, if you're a first-generation college student. Again, these have nothing to do with whether you have the scientific knowledge and skills to push forward the boundaries of knowledge.
It's bad enough in times of peace and plenty to have this kind of stuff. I was hoping that this COVID stuff got rid of all this nonsense, right? Were you hoping it would like snap us out of it and say, okay, all right, now we're in an important time. Let's enough with this silly stuff. Were you hoping that was true? Or did you think it was too ingrained already?
I'm such a pessimist at this point. I thought there's, as somebody who's been following this, it is, as you say, ingrained now into so many institutions. We saw that the Democratic primary competition was a daily competition in who can invoke white supremacy most frequently. With that being put on hold, the usual sex and race mongers had to find other ways to keep it going, and they have. I mean, we've heard the spurious claim that somehow doctors in emergency rooms and ICUs that are treating COVID patients are discriminating against minorities, thus the higher death rate in some places. That's a completely specious claim. We've also heard that, amazingly, the usual feminist organs are saying that COVID-19 discriminates against females, even though males have a much higher death rate. And that is viewed as a good thing, according to Politico. But the fact that service workers are now disproportionately females and they are thus being put out of work by these absurd economic lockdowns, that's viewed as more important than the male death rate. So identity politics is continuing, and I can tell you, Mike, if the White House goes Democratic in the fall, we ain't seen nothing yet.
Oof, I don't even know what that would look like. On that gender point, this is a tweet from the London Department of Health and Social Care, that COVID may be having a disproportionate impact on some ethnic groups as well as certain genders. That was last week, May 4th. Only certain genders, Heather.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Not sure which ones, but certain ones.
Yeah, I know.
Amazing.
It's in the sciences. That's what people have to understand. There were optimists early on who thought, the STEM fields, the science, technology, engineering, and math, they will be the one redoubt of meritocracy. Very naive, very naive. This has been going on now for decades. Millions of taxpayer dollars have been funneled into studying alleged heteronormativity in math and engineering, alleged microaggressions in chemistry labs that are preventing females from running research projects. Again, all of these things based on a fiction. There is not discrimination. In fact, females in STEM are preferred, in physics are preferred far ahead of males with much thinner research records. So the narrative is exactly wrong.
Yeah, so I think sports are going to be the last meritocracy. We'll see how long that can hold off. Let me push back on you, Heather, because you're super smart, and I want to hone my argument for this. So I'll play devil's advocate. So let's do a black man, single mom, grew up on welfare, was homeless from time to time. He just can't get that same opportunity as Mike Slater's son can, who grew up with all the opportunities afforded to him and his dad's connections. And he needs that extra, just that little extra nudge that he deserves, but wouldn't otherwise get. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, the nudge is not a little one. The sort of racial preferences we've seen in colleges are vast. It's a standard deviation of skills. That's a good argument if it worked. In fact, the skills gap in college does not close. And the real problem is when you use these racial preferences that catapult people into environments for which they're not academically prepared, they struggle. They end up at the bottom of their class. Nobody is saying that disadvantaged people, especially the so-called underrepresented minorities, should not go to college, should not get higher education. What should not happen is that they get catapulted into environments for which they're not prepared. There's nothing shameful about going to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, instead of Duke. But Duke is accepting black males with a standard deviation below of academic skills who want to major in a STEM field. What happens to those intending STEM black male majors? They disproportionately switch out of a STEM major because they can't keep up and end up in Black studies or sociology. if they had been admitted to the University of North Carolina with skills that matched their peers, they would have had a much better chance of graduating as a biology major and going on to do important research.
Interesting. Okay, let's bring it to COVID now. So do you think that these initiatives from the NSF and the CDC, NIH, do you think that will change people's behavior? Will it change pharmaceutical companies' behavior and researchers' behavior to actually hire less qualified people and therefore decrease the chances of having an effective vaccine, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, we're certainly seeing this in the corporate world where you now have businesses demanding that law firms send them so-called diverse legal teams. The question with STEM is always, is there some ceiling beyond which it doesn't go? And I've heard stories, medical schools, the MCATs, these are the medical school admission tests that seniors in college take. They admit Black medical students with MCAT scores that would be automatic rejections if a white or an Asian student presented those scores. And what happens when I've talked to teaching scientists in medical schools, oncologists that are doing research and teaching, those preferred minority students do get pushed along. The research teams are under enormous pressure to put them on their research teams, and it's frankly, it's dead wood. You know, these are people that are being selected. It's the same with sex. It's the same with sex. It's no different. You know, if I'm put onto a research team because I need to fill out their sex checklist, I'm not chosen because I'm the best scientist, and that is not going to advance our scientific agenda. So what happens with pharmaceutical countries? Yes, this is going to spread, and it will be a drag on our scientific competitiveness. Will it erase it entirely? No, but it's a drag that we can't afford.
And especially because Trump has Operation Warp Speed right now. We can't have any drag on Operation Warp Speed. Last question for you, Heather, and I've become more pessimistic too in ways. Have you thought of any good cultural, societal change that may come from all of this, or no, or are there none?
What I see is the safetyism ideology that's come out of campus has now dominated the American public. The degree of fear is unbelievable to me. The mask wearing outdoors in New York City now is about 95%. That is completely scientifically illiterate. You do not get infected outdoors. It does not happen. And yet our leaders are brainwashing us into believing that. I think that the traditional male values of courage and honor and risk-taking are being suppressed here. The traditional American values of individualism and self-reliance are not faring very well. Now, whether there'll be more of an uprising against these economically suicidal lockdowns, I hope, because we're not going to have a future if these continue. You cannot throw trillions of dollars of printed stimulus money and think that we're going to get our small businesses back. It's not going to happen.
And money borrowed from China. Heather Mac Donald, the great Heather Mac Donald, fellow at the Manhattan Institute, Diversity Delusion. Please go buy the book. Heather, wonderful to talk to you as always, man. Please keep it up.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Have a wonderful day. We'll wrap up next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I want to put a damper on myself here for a moment. Sort of a little follow-up to Heather's pessimism, which I'm bouncing back and forth between. I fall into this trap from time to time. I keep reading everywhere about how nothing's ever going to be the same, ever. We won't even recognize our lives anymore. So the question is, what's going to change? And I asked Heather, I said, what good is going to come out of this? And, good, bad, whatever. I read all these articles about how nothing's going to be the same either way. And Remember the other day I talked to Rob Henderson right here on the show, and I said, hey, Rob, what do you think is going to change? And he said, well, the safe bet is probably nothing. Probably nothing will change. Probably everything will just go back to normal. And that's not like the exciting answer. You can't write like an article in the Atlantic about how nothing is going to change in a couple of years. Everything will go back to normal. But that's probably right, isn't it? I mean, what did the 1918 flu, the Spanish flu, what did that change? I don't think anything. I don't know. Maybe if someone came back to life from the 1918, right, they'd be like, oh, you guys still don't, eat raw meat? Or I don't know. I don't even know what thing they'd say. But like, we still shake hands. We shook hands in 1917, and we're shaking hands today. So that didn't change. And, Fauci or whatever's like, and I read an article in the Atlantic this morning. There's an article about how we got to stop shaking hands. So it's like, I don't know. Are we really going to stop shaking hands in a couple of years? Probably not. We'll probably go back to it. So I don't know. Maybe nothing will change. Maybe like a little bit on the margins, right? So a couple more people will work from home than in the past. Some more people will live out in the country than in the city. Some more people will homeschool than before. A little bit on the margins. I hope those good things happen, but for the most part, we'll probably go back to the old grooves that we've made over the decades. Have you seen Jerry Seinfeld's new Netflix special? I love Seinfeld, big Seinfeld fan. I love watching the execution of his craft, of his art form. He's amazing. So the other day, my wife and I, we just watched the first 15 minutes, and it was great. We laughed a lot. Classic Seinfeld stuff. More physical comedy than I've ever seen him do before. He's like all over the stage. He's laying on the ground at one point. I've never seen him do that. But anyway, New York Times did an interview with him. And the question was, what is the question? The question was, do you worry that stand-up comedy won't ever be what it was before, and the audiences just won't come back like they once did? And his answer was, no chance of that. People are going to go back. First of all, because laughter is the greatest feeling of release that there is. And number two, the comedians are going to adapt so much quicker than everyone else. The TV shows won't quite know what to make. The movie people might not know what to make. But the comedians, within 3 nights, will know what to do, because you'll get that feedback instantly of what works and what doesn't. So on his first point, he's like, no, we'll go back. Right? I mean, this New York Times writer obviously wanted an answer like, I don't know, like, probably we'll never, ever come back together and there'll be no such thing as Cassandra Cunt. And he's like, no, we'll go back. Like, no chance. We'll definitely go back. We need that human interaction. Dave Grohl actually wrote a really good piece in The Atlantic yesterday about the need for that human interaction in live rock concerts. It was really good from him. Well, actually, one of Seinfeld's first bits is about going out and how we need to go out. Oh, it's been forever since we've gone out. We got to go out, honey. We got to go out. We haven't gone out. We got to go out. We got to go out. We got to go out. Got to go out. And then as soon as you go out halfway through, you're like, we got to start getting back. It's time we get back. It's getting pretty late. We got to get back, right? And he says, life's all about constantly changing your location because you're never happy where you are. But still, we crave going out, and we'll go back. We'll go back out. And also, second point, he spoke about being agile. Remember last week we talked a lot about that, being agile. A TV show, a movie set, those are massive productions, especially movies, huge crews, tons of money. You can't be agile. You got to make decisions years in advance on what to do, where to do it, who to hire, who to do it with. Huge, ridiculous process. Stand-up comedy, just one guy. One guy, he's agile. He gets up there, makes a couple jokes. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Figure it out, what works, what doesn't, adjust on the fly. We each need to have the attitude and the agility of a stand-up comic throughout all this. Constantly figuring out what works, what doesn't, adjusting on the fly, being agile. I love that perspective from Seinfeld. So in conclusion, I don't think much will change. I hope things do. I hope people maybe can work from home 3 days a week or something. Hope we drive less. I hope we spend more time with our kids, because hopefully people have learned that that's actually a pretty good thing. I don't know what the changes are. A great realization is necessary for all of us. I got to go, but go on the YouTube or Facebook or whatever and search for The Great Realization. It's like a 4-minute video. It's amazing, and I love it. I've watched it every couple of days. I watch it. So good. Hopefully this time is known as the Great Realization. It kind of snaps us out of a couple things that or all the things that we've been doing in the past that aren't good. I hope those changes happen. But if they do, it needs to be intentional. These need to be intentional changes. If we're not intentional about making the changes we want in our life, then we're just going to revert back to the mean, for better or worse. Slater Crusaders, hope you have a great day. Please download our app in the App Store for your smartphone. Just search for The First TV. Everything's right there, totally free. All the shows are on demand, and you can watch live. It's awesome. Perfect app. Clean, simple, easy to use, totally free. The First TV. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.